With the baby boomers dying off, many people ask me, what is Gen Z like and what does it mean for the future? But with the baby boomers dying off, I don't have time to answer. And anyway, what's it to me? However, there is a new poll out on how these Gen Z whippersnappers see things, and the results are very encouraging in the sense they'll allow me to die happy in the knowledge that the rest of you are screwed. The poll of around 3,000 respondents between the ages of 18 and 29 was specially designed to elicit information from young people by posing its questions in the form of emojis and inarticulate whining noises, and then pretending to take the answers seriously. The results had a margin of error of 79% because the young people had no clue what the hell they were talking about and then changed their minds when they found out what life was really like. The young people were asked such questions as, what do you value most? Is America headed in the right direction? What the hell do you know, you nose-ringed freak? And why don't you get a job and find your own place to live? You're 20 years old already, for crying out loud. The respondents were then divided by gender using a buzzsaw and a surgical needle threaded with fishing line. Then the genders were separated politically by riot police with tear gas and rubber bullets. Finally, the survivors sat around smoking weed until the women fell asleep, and the men, of course, had sex with them. The results of the poll show that among young men, the number one thing they valued most was having children. The number 4 thing they valued was getting married. Numbers 2 and 3 were avoiding paying child support and using pig's blood during a paternity test before changing their names and moving out of state. Among women, the number 1 thing they valued most was their jobs. The number 2 thing they valued was emotional stability, and the number 3 thing they valued were antidepressants. These women also valued making TikTok videos expressing completely nonsensical opinions in a smug voice while smiling like Anthony Perkins at the end of Psycho and secretly wishing some guy would marry them and tell them what to do because they're obviously out of their minds. The poll also revealed ingrained differences between young men and women when it came to political issues. For instance, 56% of young men feel that Donald Trump is doing an excellent job as president, while 82% of young women also have political opinions, but nobody bothered to write them down because, let's face it, who cares? The biggest political divide between the genders was on immigration. Young women felt that it was a crying shame to deport an upstanding pillar of the community just because he had come here illegally and had drunkenly crashed his car into an elementary school, then escaped before the police discovered the child tied up in his trunk. Young men didn't answer the question because they were too busy watching cool videos of ICE agents slamming fat Mexicans into the sides of their jalopies while screaming the F word. One surprising result in the poll is that young people increasingly favor socialism. They listed their primary reasons as 1, they'd have a lot of time to play Candy Crush while they were standing in line to get a loaf of bread. 2, they've seen the miniseries Chernobyl, and it looked really cool when people's flesh started to melt like in a science fiction movie, only real. And 3, under socialism, there would be no corporations, and everything would be free, so you could just pick up a new iPhone anytime you wanted it, wherever it is that iPhones come from. All in all, the results of the poll demonstrated that Generation Z is called Generation Z for a good reason, namely, nothing comes after Z. With the first female umpire now working in baseball, it's time to take a look at how women have made historic strides in the world of professional sports by ruining everything. You see, in the past, professional sports provided a safe method for wives to get their husbands out of the damn way by placing them in front of the television where they could watch something completely meaningless that wasn't. That way, the wives could get their work done, and if they occasionally dropped in on the TV room with a sandwich and a beer, their husbands would happily devote the rest of their lives to their support and happiness. Later, over dinner, the husbands could describe every play of the game in agonizing detail, which would give the wives time to mentally organize their schedules for the week since they didn't have to listen to a word their husbands were saying because it was just about a guy on TV hitting a ball with a stick for some reason. At least their husbands hadn't spent the day watching some naked girl pretend to enjoy getting strangled during sex, which would only have given them bizarre ideas about how they should spend the rest of the weekend. Now all that has changed. Women are invading every aspect of sports so that men can watch other men do useless things for no reason while thinking about sexual strangulation at the same time. For instance, after ball games, Attractive female sportscasters are now assigned to interview players, so male viewers can listen vaguely to some athlete saying, "You've got to take it one game at a time," while simultaneously wondering what the female sportscaster would look like if she were wearing some ridiculous leather contraption and a pair of handcuffs. Having more women athletes on the field has also changed the nature of sports by ruining everything. Sports used to reflect masculine values like winning and also more winning. But now, sports also have to reflect female values, which run the gamut from incomprehensible to non-existent, depending on the woman's mood on any given day. For example, when gymnast Simone Biles quit the Tokyo Olympics because she had some girly problem called the twisties, most men felt this was tantamount to losing, which according to many sports analysts is approximately the opposite of winning. But no, the men were swiftly informed that in fact Simone Biles had been very brave to quit like a girl over her girly twisties. And ever since then, Olympic women's gymnastics has included quitting as an event, along with crying, hugging the winner as if you were happy for her, and giving men a look that says they better not say something insensitive or they'll be held to pay. In women's basketball, Caitlin Clark has completely transformed the game by causing people to realize there's such a thing as women's basketball. To thank her, black women players have been repeatedly beating the living crap out of Clark for being talented while white. This turns out to be a game that men will actually watch because it involves women wrestling with each other. So now men are showing up at women's basketball games and hurling sex toys down at the court, which has also made the women's game more popular by including sex toys. Even so, a women's basketball game remains the least popular American event that isn't a colonoscopy. And when the players recently marched outside the stadium holding signs that said, "Pay us what we're worth," they discovered they actually owed the league $15,000 apiece. To prove that it's not only women who ruin everything in sports, the NFL's Minnesota Vikings have hired 2 male cheerleaders. So now, instead of an occasional amusing glimpse of pretty girls prancing around the sidelines in an intriguingly suggestive way, Vikings fans are being treated to 2 prancing homosexuals. Something no sentient creature wants to see, except other homosexuals who aren't even watching sports because they're homosexual. And as for the first female umpire, so far, her ball and strike calls have been about 1.5% less accurate than the average males, which is being hailed as really great for a girl and should transform the sport completely by ruining everything. Who knows you better than yourself? Your family? Your friends? Well, if you own any internet-connected device, there are thousands of companies that might know you better than you know yourself. They're called data brokers, and they make billions tracking everything you do online. Every purchase, every location, every conversation, your most personal beliefs, all packaged into a profile they sell to marketers, activists, and yes, politicians looking to influence you. You could go completely off the grid, or you could just use ExpressVPN. These companies track you through your IP address, your digital fingerprint. ExpressVPN gives you a new IP address in a location you choose, making you virtually untraceable. With ExpressVPN, your connection is encrypted and routed through secure servers. Even your internet provider can't see your activity, which is important since they're legally allowed to sell your data to whoever they want. I use it on all my devices. It keeps me safe. It keeps my data safe. ExpressVPN works on all your devices as well. Phones, laptops, tablets, just one click for instant privacy. Find out how you can get 4 months free by scanning the QR code on screen, clicking the link in the description box below, or by going to expressvpn.com/Andrew Klavan Show. There's growing pressure on Democrat Virginia Attorney General candidate Jay Jones to step down after Jones's 2022 texts were uncovered in which he fantasized about shooting political opponent Todd Gilbert in the head and wished Gilbert's toddler children would die in their mother's arms. Jones has apologized for the texts and says he was obviously joking since nothing spells comedy like dead children. So far, Democrats are standing behind Jones because it's obviously much too dangerous to stand in front of him. The Democrats dismiss calls for Jones to quit the race, saying the pressure for his resignation is being manufactured by right-wing news outlets, partisan Republicans in name only, independents, people who vote Democrat because they haven't realized yet what's happened to the party, Europeans, Asians, South American cartel members in their rare moments of moral awareness, primitive indigenous peoples who have no clue what the hell is even happening, chimpanzees in zoos who've been taught enough sign language to recognize a dirtbag when they see one, and anyone else with an ounce of common decency. Abigail Spanberger, the Democrats' candidate for Virginia governor, says she continues to back Jones 100% because to back him even 1% less would suggest she was nursing some flickering spark of conscience that might force her to change her party affiliation. In a speech to a group of anti-fascists and other fascists, Ms. Spanberger said, quote, "When I think of who should be the chief law officer of Virginia, I think of Jay Jones, a man who was once arrested for driving 116 miles an hour, and when he was sentenced to 500 hours of community service, he served every single hour of that sentence by claiming that working for his own political PAC was community service. So this is a man of integrity. Although I really have to look that word up because I'm not sure it means what I think it means," unquote. Tim Kaine is also throwing his support behind Jones. Kaine was himself the governor of Virginia and recently made headlines, and I'm not making this part up. Kaine made headlines when he declared that the idea that human rights come from God was, quote-unquote, extremely troubling and sounded like the sort of thing people believed in theocratic tyrannies like Iran. When Kaine was told the idea came from yet another Virginia governor, Thomas Jefferson, Kaine said Jefferson should be impeached. When Kaine was told that Jefferson had died centuries ago and was in fact one of the founding fathers of the United States of America, Kaine broke down and admitted that he was a complete ignoramus and should not have any say at all in how America was governed and had therefore decided to become a U.S. Senator. In a speech to a meeting of anti-racists and other racists, Kaine said, quote, "Jay Jones is a friend of mine and I know his heart. Yet even so, I continue to support his candidacy for Attorney General because the hunger for power has hollowed out my soul and left me with no moral compass whatsoever. And I think I speak for all morally hollow ignoramuses when I stand before you with this atrocious nonsense pouring out of my mouth, while even I look on with a kind of fascinated horror at how deeply I degrade myself when I sacrifice every other value to my political ambition," unquote. Now, some of you may be asking yourself, why would the Democrats, a political party whose members share margaritas with wife-beating gangsters, tell the police not to come to the aid of federal law officers when they're under mob attack, unleash hate on a conservative leader after his children have been orphaned by an assassin's bullet, and pour into the street to support a terrorist attack that killed more Jews than any attack since the Holocaust? Why would the members of such a party stand behind a candidate who dreams of shooting his political opponent in the head and wishes the man's children would die in their mother's arms? And if you are asking yourself that question, you might want to tell the zookeeper to teach you a little more sign language. Knowledgeable sources say the Trump administration is being torn to pieces by its mishandling of the Epstein scandal. Although in its first 6 months, the administration has scored a string of successes so long you couldn't read it in the time it took to achieve it, knowledgeable sources on both the left and the right are saying that the poor handling of the Epstein story should erase all those successes so that commentators can continue to scream in outraged tones with the veins in their necks bulging out while their audience clenches their fists and shouts, "Yeah," in gravelly voices, even though they're listening to complete crap. Although Trump has tried to argue that all is well in an administration that has closed the border, helped neutralize Iran, and operated the government at a surplus for the first time in over 20 years, knowledgeable sources report that, in fact, everything is coming apart at the seams, if indeed everything has seams, which remains just one more open question in the Epstein case. One knowledgeable source, for instance, says that FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino recently clashed with Attorney General Pam Bondi, vowing that he would unleash a vengeance more horrible than her wildest imagination if Bondi did not release more information about Epstein, or at least stop wearing those pantsuits that keep reminding him of Hillary Clinton, which is just making him crazy in the head. The knowledgeable source says Bongino then put Bondi in a chokehold, and the two rolled around on the floor in a cloud of dust with various articles of jewelry and clothing flying out of it until a stalemate was declared, and they moved on to the next agenda item, which was a potato sack race. Another knowledgeable source reports that FBI Director Kash Patel's girlfriend obviously must have enlisted him in the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad, because how else can anyone explain why a woman that beautiful would go out with a guy who looks like Kash Patel, especially when the knowledgeable source was sitting right there in plain sight and would have gladly worked for Mossad or anyone else if Kash Patel's girlfriend, or just some woman who looked like Kash Patel's girlfriend, had simply leaned in close to the knowledgeable source and murmured in a sultry voice, "Come and work for Mossad." Still, another knowledgeable source reports that a voice coming from somewhere within the administration has spoken to him through the fillings in his teeth and revealed that the end of days has come. Or possibly a friend of Dave's has come. It was hard for the knowledgeable source to hear because the reception in his fillings has been very spotty lately, despite the fact that he's been wearing rabbit ear antennae on top of his tinfoil hat. In any case, if it turns out that it's not the end of days that has come, but a friend of Dave's, then no action is currently required, except maybe putting out some snacks and a pot of chamomile tea, which Dave's friend particularly enjoys. Another knowledgeable source has revealed exclusively to Tucker Carlson that the Epstein cover-up is all the fault of the Jews. Although Tucker's knowledgeable source loaned his rabbit ear antennae to the end of days knowledgeable source, so the cover-up may have actually been all the fault of the Jews, since no one's seen OJ around recently, and who knows what he's been getting up to. In any case, Tucker gave an impassioned speech to TPUSA, saying, quote, "Why should it be forbidden to blame it all on Israel? Somehow Israel is the only country on earth you're not allowed to blame for anything. That's why you have all these Israelis walking around happy-go-lucky without a care in the world. It's because no one ever blames them for anything. Well, I'm not afraid of being called anti-Semitic. After all, that's where the big money is," unquote. Trump supporters are hoping the president will see to it that more information is released soon, because knowledgeable sources are going to continue to spread the inside story about the Epstein scandal until someone finally tells us the freaking truth. For more great content, like and subscribe to The Andrew Klavan Show wherever you get your podcasts.